think back to December 31st, 2020, New Year's Eve. Where were you and what were you doing? Did you tuck in early with a pillow over your head to avoid your neighbor's deafening fireworks? Or did you stay up until all hours celebrating the end of a year that was like no other in so many ways, saying a heartfelt and energetic farewell? I was with my husband and son and a very special friend. We decided to split the difference between those two scenarios and celebrate big in a small Airbnb outside of town. We talked about lessons learned. We made resolutions for the year ahead. We celebrated a fresh start, my favorite way, with dark chocolate and something bubbly. Writing resolutions on tiny slips of paper and then setting them ablaze. Outside, of course. Those ashy pieces of paper floated off with the hope that our wishes and dreams would manifest in the universe. It was a memorable night for sure. We all hoped, really, it's over, right? Vaccinations are on the way, plans are being made to return to the workplace, the fog is beginning to lift. We can see the future more clearly ahead. And yet we learned quickly that was not to be. The new normal became the next normal, and the next normal after that. While we recognize there's an extreme disparity of experiences during these past 19 months with the COVID-19 pandemic, economic crisis, and reawakening of the social justice and racial equity movements, there is no doubt that we have all been changed forever in some way. For our nonprofit sector, the effect of this journey is both inspiring and cautionary. In the words of Dan Cardinelli, president and CEO of the independent sector, quote, "The U.S. nonprofit sector is the underpinning of our society. And in 2021, we have seen this continue in extraordinary and extraordinarily painful ways." I'd like to dig deeper into the extraordinary and the extraordinarily painful themes from our vantage point at the Nonprofit Leadership Center. Let's start with 3 extraordinarily painful things. First, we see workforce issues. Retaining and acquiring talent to do our work has never been more challenging. And while this is certainly not unique to the nonprofit sector, the current situation is especially acute for nonprofits with historically lower pay and funder restrictions often constraining growth and the ability to be competitive in the labor market. In the words of Vu Lee, our field loses too many talented staff because we are mired in this mentality of scrappiness. The natural follow-on to this then becomes staff turnover. According to the Chronicle Philanthropy, the average tenure of a fund development professional nationally is 16 months. According to the Nonprofit Quarterly, nonprofit executive directors and CEOs serve in that role for an average of 6 years, and this tenure is expected to decline. It's not surprising then that we at NLC are seizing an increased need for succession planning support to plan for departing CEOs as well as turnover in board leadership. I'd categorize all this as extraordinarily painful. Secondly, we see decision fatigue. Again, this isn't unique to the nonprofit sector, but certainly a contributing factor to the succession planning surge I just referenced. How do we best maintain safety for our workforces while delivering programs to our most vulnerable audiences? How far can we bend our programming strategy to accommodate funder requests without risking mission creep? These constant pressures to make decisions without clarity around what's ahead can lead to a state New York Times writer Adam Grant has described as languishing. He defines languishing as the state between flourishing, or the peak of well-being, and depression, the valley of ill-being. He goes on to say that languishing can dull motivation, disrupt the ability to focus, and triples the odds that a person will cut back on work. another extraordinarily painful reality for many in our sector. Finally, we see a struggle to shift the understanding of the importance of truly embracing a culture centered on the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. In our most recent 2021 survey of nonprofit leaders, when asked what resources they needed most, DEI rose to the top of the list. And if I may for a moment, we want you all to know we are here at NLC to support you in this quest. We have onboarded new talent. You'll be hearing from our very own superstar, Mariel Martinez, in one of the upcoming breakouts. We have new tools, including assessments and classes. And in 2021, we stood up a new fellowship program to advance racial equity on nonprofit boards for both professionals of color seeking board service and nonprofits interested in diversifying their boards. In full transparency, let me also say we are not entirely where we'd like to be yet, but grateful to be on this journey, guided by an engaged board-level DEI committee, a fully committed team, including board and staff. And while I'll acknowledge that the unity of purpose around this topic may not be shared universally across all organizations, I'm reminded of something one of our conference participants said in last year's event. Quote, "Courageous leadership is about speaking when your opinion is not popular and taking action even when there is risk." So while this journey may be extraordinarily painful, or at the very least uncomfortable for many, the right time to commit to bold action is now. Let's look next at what's extraordinary in the nonprofit sector, as we see plenty of it each day. I'd like to focus on three things. First, we see speed. The speed at which the nonprofit sector responded to the confluence of crises, creating new environments to counsel clients, distribute food, build homes, hold board meetings, communicate with donors, engage and manage a diverse workforce, organize and stand up movements, rallies, and unimaginable resources at a frenzied pace. And along with this, we saw the debunking of the overused and tired mischaracterization of the nonprofit sector as being inefficient, wasteful, and slow to change. Not the case then, and not the case now. We see focus on mission. We saw attendance improve at board meetings, no-show rates decline at counseling sessions, theater productions and parking lots, teams working remotely engaged in both reflection and robust action, building new processes and possibilities for the delivery of critical services. A recent report released by Deloitte found that, quote, social change leaders, inspired by Winston Churchill's often quoted admonition not to let a good crisis go to waste, are working with renewed sense of purpose and possibility. Finally, we see grace in our sector. Call it unity, call it collective action or impact. We see people coming together, despite the divided world in which we live, choosing to find common ground to move issues and our lives forward. And whether people are drawn to nonprofit work because of a high level of inherent empathy, or whether this trait has been burnished by the past months of uncertainty, separation, and sadness for many, we see it every day in our work. A dropped Zoom call, a dog or cat making a cameo appearance in a virtual meeting, a parent pulling double duty and helping a child with homework while on a 10-minute break from a virtual class. There is a palpable sense of commonality and that we are all going through this together. So the question is, where do we go from here? What of these learnings from the past 19 months are going to stick and carry us forward to flourishing, if you're not there already? and to reimagining true sustainable impact? Well, I won't presume to know what the answer is for you, but I can tell you that leading bravely and acting boldly will be essential. So in closing, I ask you to imagine as if today were the start of a new year. What wishes and dreams would you write down on tiny pieces of paper? Hopefully with a side of something chocolate and something bubbly. And as I send you forward to join the inspiring content ahead, I want to leave you with a quote from one of my favorite authors, Brené Brown. She said, quote, "Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light." Keep burning bright today and always, my friends. Here's to leading bravely and acting boldly.